In this single-owner collection assembled by the late Giulio Bertrand on behalf of the Tasso Foundation, the Irma stone behind me is undoubtedly a highlight lot. Depicting the Grand Venetian Canal, this lot shows Irma stone's command of depicting water, as well as unusual in that it is a more architectural rendition that is akin to her works of the Madeira harbour scenes and her later Cape harbour scenes. Stern first visited Venice in 1937 on an extended stay in Italy for 4 months. She returned some years later after her exhibitions in Paris, London and Rotterdam in 1948 when the current example was painted. I think what's also important to note about this picture is that much a portrait of the late Giulio Bertrand as it is of Irma Stern. This is an Italian collector that's settled in South Africa, and this obviously is, one of the most depicted cityscapes in the world. Venice being that magical floating city with depictions of it going all the way back to Canal. We notice the Italian flag in the top of the picture. So what we've got is a picture by undoubtedly one of the masters of South African expressionism or a neo-expressionist. And then we've got an Italian immigrant purchasing this work because of, I suppose, his attachment to his home country and obviously to the grand vistas of the Venetian canals. The earliest Irma stone that we've got on the sale is a rendition of a Swazi woman cloaked in red sash. Irma stone visited Swaziland in 1927. It brings her observational acuity to life in the fact that we don't see a generic portrait, but rather an individual that Stern has taken great pains to represent and bring to life. Similarly, in Seated Woman Zanzibar, we've got an enigmatic portrait that Stern painted presumably on one of her journeys to the Sultan's palace in 1945 when she visited Zanzibar. Famously, Stern was granted an audience with the Sultana, and this portrait in gouache on paper we think is possibly a lady of the court in waiting for the Sultana of Zanzibar. Interestingly, the collection of Irma stones also comprises of quite a large painting dated 1962 entitled Olive Pickers. Morgenster has become known for its olives and its olive oil, with Mr. Bertrand planting his own varietals, importing and planting his own varietals on the farm, which adds another layer of significance to the Olive Pickers by Irma stone. Dahlias, I think, were possibly her favorite flower, and she had done various iterations on a number of scales. In this composition, we see Stern relying on a black vase with a basket tilted in perspective with the apples overflowing, and the horizon and the basket taking up a majority of the left-hand side of the picture, with an acid yellow that retreats into the background, allowing the subtle pinks and reds of the dahlias to reveal themselves. Stern uses fabric that fills up the foreground and frames her fruit in almost an academic tone, whilst the background is very reminiscent of impressionist-like colors that allow the central composition of the exploding hydrangeas to gesture towards the edges of the canvas and allow a liveliness to the picture that wants to almost pop off the surface of the canvas. Important to note with the Irma stone's two still lives, Dahlias and a basket of apples and hydrangeas and mangoes, these works were executed in between the late 30s and 40s, which is a high point in Irma stone's production, specifically also correlating to her travels in Congo and Zanzibar in between 1939 and 1945.